This is Booked for Drama, where stories burn, hearts break, the tea is always hot and never a part 2. Today we're diving into My Cousin Asked Me to Lend Her My Fiancé for One Night. Let's go. Chapter 1. My name is Andrea Newman. At my engagement party, my cousin Liliana Grant pretended to be drunk, secretly took an aphrodisiac, and tearfully begged me to lend her my fiancé Chandler Lacken for one night. I found Archer Martin for her, who had always been devoted to her. When Liliana woke up and discovered it wasn't Chandler in bed with her, she killed herself in shame and rage. Chandler didn't blame me for this and continued to treat me as before. I always felt guilty about Liliana, and after her death, I took care of her family with great devotion. However, on our wedding day, Chandler had me poisoned and thrown to beggars to be violated. Liliana suffered this same pain at Christmas, so use your vile body to atone for her. I was tortured to death on my wedding night, dying along with my unborn child. When I opened my eyes again, I had returned to that night when Liliana cried and begged me to give her Chandler. At the engagement party, Liliana pretended to be drunk, took an aphrodisiac, and tearfully pleaded with me. "Andrea, please let Chandler save me, won't you?" She cried while tugging at my evening gown. "Andrea, I just need to borrow Chandler for one night. Please help me out, won't you?" I looked down at Liliana sobbing at my feet and sighed softly. "Liliana, Chandler and I are already engaged. If you do this, how will you ever get married in the future?" Chandler also frowned and scolded her. "I'm your sister's husband. Your behavior is truly disgusting." With that, he kicked Liliana away and pulled me along as he turned to leave. Looking at Liliana struggling in pain on the ground, I ultimately softened. I called Archer, who had always admired her. Liliana and Archer were already betrothed, and Archer was an upright man who would never spread word of this incident. Having him help was the most appropriate choice under the circumstances. However, when she woke up and found Archer beside her, she broke down crying on the spot. She pointed at me and cursed that I had ruined her life, then resolutely killed herself. This incident became a shadow I could never shake from my heart. I always believed I was the one who caused her death. After she died, I devoted myself to caring for her family. Chandler was considerate of my efforts and often accompanied me to look after them. But on my wedding night, he actually brought several beggars to violate me to death. I desperately begged him to spare me, but he looked at me with disgust. "If it weren't for you, I could have been with Liliana long ago. This is all your fault. Liliana suffered this same pain at Christmas. She's dead, so use your life to atone for her." It turned out that before getting engaged to me, he had already been having an affair with Liliana. I learned from Liliana's diary that she gave him that she was his first love. But he didn't know that the diary recorded everything about me, bit by bit. Liliana had been jealous of my background since childhood and imitated me almost obsessively. From clothing style to speech and mannerisms, she even copied my diary entries word for word. She thought that by imitating everything about me, she could take my place. In my previous life, I repeatedly gave in because she was my cousin, and ultimately lost my life. In this life, I decided to fulfill their wishes, because I had more important things to do. When the familiar plot unfolded again, I left early under the pretense of changing my dress, leaving the stage entirely to Liliana. Sure enough, just like in my previous life, she pretended to be drunk and accidentally took an aphrodisiac. Then she pushed Archer away and searched everywhere for Chandler and me. Unable to find me, she could only kneel on the ground and beg Chandler, "Please save me, won't you? If you don't save me, I'll die." She used life and death to pressure Chandler. A flash of disgust crossed Chandler's face. However, a servant came to report to me in a low voice. Mr. Lacken said he had business and left early. Looking at myself in the mirror, images of my tragic death in my previous life flashed through my mind, making me shudder. Fortunately, I was reborn. In this life, I would personally send them both to hell. I instructed, "Go ask Mr. Martin to come. Tell him I'm very worried about Liliana and would like him to help search for her." After the servant left, I began making a show of searching for Chandler everywhere. Wherever I went, I anxiously asked, "Have you seen my fiancé and my cousin?" Soon, all the guests at the engagement party knew that Chandler and Liliana had disappeared together. Archer was also extremely anxious when he heard, "Liliana is a young lady. If word of this gets out, it will greatly damage her reputation." He immediately ordered his men, "Find Liliana as quickly as possible." Everyone scattered to search, practically turning the entire mansion upside down. Only Chandler's and my bridal chamber remained unchecked. Everyone stood hesitantly at the door, caught in a dilemma. Just then, I ran over anxiously. Have you found Liliana and Chandler? Everyone remained silent. A servant said, we've searched all the other rooms. Only this one is left. Before he could finish, I pushed the door open forcefully. Chandler, Liliana, are you in there? The next second, a woman's scream and a man's angry roar came from inside the room. I stood in the doorway in shock, while everyone behind me witnessed the scene with their own eyes. Chandler was actually sleeping with my cousin Liliana at our engagement party. I looked at Chandler with a pale face. You. Before I could finish speaking, everything went black and I fainted. Archer quickly caught me, glaring at Chandler. Your family must give us an explanation for this, or else. He didn't continue, but everyone understood his meaning. The Martin family was currently at the height of their power. Even though Archer was only the second son, he wasn't someone just anyone could casually humiliate. Archer helped me leave the scene. Chapter 2. When I woke up again, it was already evening. My parents Jesse Newman and Phoebe Newman, Liliana's mother Isabel Grant, as well as people from the Lakin and Martin families were all present. Seeing me awake, Chandler's mother Sienna Lakin immediately stepped forward to help me up. Andrea, you're finally awake. However, I avoided Sienna and threw myself into Phoebe's arms, sobbing loudly. Anyone who saw this would think I was a pitiful person who had been wronged. Sienna awkwardly withdrew her hand and said softly, Andrea, what's done is done. How about letting your sister marry Chandler too? Don't worry, you'll still be Chandler's wife. After saying this, she turned to look at Chandler and Liliana behind her. We mean for Liliana to be Chandler's concubine. This way, we can save face for all our families, and you sisters can look after each other. What do you think? After hearing this, Jessie snorted with displeasure. Your family sure has some nerve, still wanting my daughter to marry Chandler? Ha, in your dreams. The Martin family members also looked displeased. Archer's fiancé was being offered to Chandler as a concubine. If word of this got out, the Martin family would lose all face. Naturally, Liliana was unwilling. Seeing herself about to go from being the legitimate wife to a concubine, how could she possibly agree? She had worked so hard to climb up to Chandler's level, and it wasn't to become a concubine. Liliana nestled in Chandler's arms, crying breathlessly. Andrea, as long as you can forgive Chandler, I'm willing to be a concubine. I just beg you not to be angry with Chandler because of me. At this moment, Isabel was also crying nearby. Andrea, if you don't let Liliana off the hook, she'll really have no way out. Shut up, look at the fine daughter you've raised. Doing such shameful things, and you still have the nerve to cry here? Jesse said angrily. He had always been especially tolerant of Isabel. No matter what mistakes she made, he would overlook them for the sake of her being a widow with a child. But now, Isabel had actually encouraged Liliana to do such a thing. Jesse felt utterly humiliated. Seeing his beloved crying so sadly, Chandler felt heartbroken. He frowned and looked at me. I've already agreed to marry you. What more do you want? Must you drive Liliana to desperation before you're satisfied? As soon as he finished speaking, his father slapped him hard across the face. Shut your mouth. You have no say here. Jesse looked coldly at this father and son pair and said, you don't need to put on this touching father-son act in front of me. Andrea will never marry into your family. This slap completely enraged Chandler. He glared at his father. In this lifetime, I'll marry no one but Liliana. Father, if you like Andrea so much, you can marry her yourself. Alex Martin, Archer's father who had been watching coldly from the sidelines, couldn't help but sneer. Is this the Lakin family's upbringing? After saying this, he looked at Jesse. In this matter, both our families are victims. How about our two families form a marriage alliance? What do you think? Jesse stared at Alex in disbelief. Do you think my daughter is some commodity for people to pick and choose from? Alex smiled and explained, now that's not a nice way to put it. When word of today's incident gets out, our family will lose face, but Andrea is the real victim here. How will she be able to marry in the future? Jesse was about to refuse when he heard me speak calmly. What benefit would there be for me in forming a marriage alliance with your family? Chapter 3. Seeing me speak up, Alex's face immediately lit up with joy. He had been dissatisfied with Liliana for a long time. He'd always felt she was not only narrow-minded, but there was also a calculating gleam in her eyes. If it weren't for Archer's feelings for Liliana, he would never have allowed such a woman to set foot in their home. Now seeing me relent, he was naturally overjoyed. He said, Andrea, I can't guarantee everything else, but there are a few things I can absolutely promise. First, we'll divide the family assets. As soon as you two marry, I'll immediately go to the notary office to handle the paperwork for all our shops and property deeds. My two sons will each get 40%, and the remaining 20% will be kept for our retirement. Second, Alex drew out his tone, looking at Chandler with disdain before continuing slowly, the Martin family values propriety above all. Archer would never cause the kind of scandal where he gets entangled with his fiancé's cousin at an engagement party. As for the final point, after marriage, all assets belonging to you two must be registered under your name. As soon as these words were spoken, everyone present gasped in shock. This was practically giving away the entire family fortune to Andrea. The Martin family was really going all out for Archer's marriage. Only Chandler's family, Liliana, and Isabel looked grim. Alex's words were practically pointing at their noses and calling them shameless. I listened quietly and nodded. Others might not be able to tell if his words were true or false, but I knew better. In my previous life, after Liliana's death, Archer had followed his family's arrangements and married another woman. Although Archer didn't love her, he still treated her with utmost care and consideration. All the family's properties and deeds were put under that woman's name, while he himself owned nothing. If I could be with such a person, even if he didn't love me, at least he wouldn't harm me. Moreover, with the advantage of information from my rebirth, I might not need to depend on a man to survive. It's just that the social climate of this era was ultimately harsh toward women. If I didn't marry, Jesse and Phoebe would be subjected to gossip and bear the burden of shame. I didn't care what happened to me, but I couldn't drag them into controversy. I said, "All right, then I'll consider it." Hearing this, Archer's parents were both stunned, then broke into satisfied smiles. But Liliana, who had been watching from the sidelines, could no longer sit still. She looked at Alex angrily. "Why? That's not what you said before. You clearly said you'd only give 30% of the family assets. And you never said you'd transfer all the assets to my name." Alex frowned at her. "Since you got engaged to Archer, what haven't we provided for your food, clothing, and expenses? I made this decision because I was afraid you'd squander the family fortune. Besides, how do your family background and looks compare to Andrea's? I simply prefer Andrea and am willing to offer up our family assets with both hands." "What's wrong with that?" Liliana was left speechless by his retort, looking tearfully at Archer. "Are you just going to watch them bully your fiancé like this?" Archer looked at her coldly. "Miss Grant, please watch your words. I am no longer your fiancé." Liliana was left choking on her words and threw herself into Chandler's arms, sobbing. Seeing our two families settle the marriage matter in just a few exchanges, Chandler's expression grew increasingly sour. He pushed Liliana out of his arms and stormed up to me angrily. "Andrea, you're my fiancé, and you're talking about marrying someone else right in front of me. Have you considered my feelings at all?" Chapter 4. I looked up at him with some curiosity. "What do you mean by that? When you were lying with Liliana at the engagement party, did you ever consider my feelings? Before judging others, you should at least manage yourself first." Chandler's face flushed red with anger as he pointed at me. "Fine, Andrea, you'd better not regret this." With that, he stormed off with Liliana in tow. As she left, Liliana looked at me provocatively and mouthed, "I won." Watching her arrogant demeanor, I couldn't help but find it somewhat amusing. Did she really think the Lakin family were all good people, and that marrying into their family would bring her happiness? How could someone like Chandler ever truly love anyone? If he really loved Liliana, he could have broken off our engagement before getting engaged and married her openly and honorably. But he didn't. He and Liliana had been entangled for half a year before my engagement. During those 6 months, he had hundreds of ways to call off our engagement and be with her legitimately. But he didn't. Instead, he chose to have an affair with Liliana at our engagement party, in front of everyone, making her the object of universal scorn. Yet Liliana remained oblivious, thinking that as long as she latched onto Chandler, she could enjoy endless wealth and glory. Unfortunately, she was wrong. The Lakin family were merchants. The saying, "merchants value profit above all," wasn't just a joke when it came to the Lakin family. After everyone left, Phoebe took my hand and tried to persuade me, "Andrea, our family has money and can support you. Why must you insist on getting married?" Looking at my parents, whose temples were already showing some gray, my mind flashed to scenes from my previous life, how they were oppressed and died in depression after my death. In this life, I must protect them. I said, "Dad, go buy that horse ranch in the eastern suburbs." Though Jesse didn't understand, he agreed. "All right, if my little princess wants it, I'll definitely buy it for you." I smiled at him. No, this is my gift to you. Phoebe tapped my nose playfully. Who gives gifts like that? I stuck out my tongue. You'll understand when the time comes. I arranged to meet Archer alone for dinner. There were some things he had the right to know. He sat down across from me. Andrea, why did you ask me here today? I set down my coffee and looked up at him seriously. I want to join the independence movement. Archer was stunned. What did you say? I want to join the independence movement. I repeated each word clearly. You're aware of the current situation in the colonies. So I want to do something for this newborn land. I want to join the independence movement. I called you here today to tell you this. If you mind, I can decline the marriage proposal. I don't mind. Archer interrupted me. Not only do I not mind, but I'll join you. I looked up at him excitedly. But participating in the independence movement could be life-threatening, you. Archer actually smiled at this. Throughout history, pursuing freedom has always required sacrifice. I'm not afraid. He continued looking at me. My father's proposal to transfer the family assets to the wife's name is actually because he's worried that I might not be around someday. So I've long been prepared to make sacrifices. He had never forgotten those compatriots struggling under colonial rule. He said, now, everything is urgent. Andrea, have you ever experienced that feeling? Seeing your compatriots oppressed but being powerless to help? Looking at Archer, I nodded solemnly. I understood. He told me about his work. We're currently spreading a new ideology. This is a difficult and prolonged struggle. If you're willing to join us, I can introduce you to my superior. I smiled and extended my hand to him. Then I'll wait for your good news. He gripped my hand tightly. We look forward to having you join us. From then on, my relationship with Archer seemed to grow much closer. With his superior's approval, he took me to their secret meeting place. With Archer as my witness, I officially became one of them. I would stand shoulder to shoulder with him, using our lives to pursue freedom and independence. When Jesse and Phoebe learned about this, they worried for a long time. Phoebe took my hand and said, Andrea, it's not that I don't love our country, but you're my only daughter, and I really can't bear to let you go. As she spoke, her eyes reddened, and Jesse also turned away, quietly wiping his tears. I had expected them to oppose and refuse, but they actually agreed. Jesse said, that you can serve your country is our honor. No matter what, we're proud of you. I hugged them excitedly. Dad, Mom, I promise I'll protect myself. Chapter 5. A week later, I agreed to the marriage between Alex and Archer. Alex was thrilled and personally took Archer to help me shop for wedding supplies. Alex said excitedly, you have no idea how long I've had my eye on Andrea. She's smart, beautiful, and has such grace. You'd better treat her well, or I won't let you off the hook. Archer told me this while I was swinging on the garden swing in the backyard. I asked with a smile, why does your father like me so much? Archer scratched his head sheepishly and laughed. Our family has a military background for generations, and only my generation started focusing on education. So father has always hoped we brothers could marry refined wives. Unfortunately, my older brother's wife also comes from a military family, so I laughed after hearing this. So your father's dream has finally come true? Archer nodded, I suppose so. I stopped smiling and looked at him, what about you? He was taken aback by my question, me? I nodded, what's your dream? Do you feel any regret about not marrying Liliana? Archer paused for a moment, my dream is naturally for the country to be peaceful and prosperous. As for regret, I wouldn't say so. I never really liked Liliana, I was only good to her because she was my fiancé. I nodded, that's good then, otherwise I'd feel guilty. Archer looked at me with a smile, you don't need to feel guilty. In fact, I should be grateful. My mother says I'm marrying above my station by marrying you. So you should feel fortunate that I get to marry you. Your parents raised you really well, I said. Archer and I found time to take our wedding photos. The wedding date was set quickly, Alex specially chose the day. Archer and I had no objections, after all, we still had our mission to complete. Both sets of parents were busy beyond belief. Many high-ranking officials and dignitaries came to the wedding, making it quite grand. Alex bought us a villa near my parents' house. He said, Andrea, you're your parents' only child, so naturally they can't bear to see you married off. This house is my gift to you. After you're married, you'll live here, it's convenient to both families. I accepted the property deed and thanked him with a smile, thank you. Alex was overjoyed and immediately wanted to give me all his savings. I stopped him, this is your retirement money, how could we take it? Archer's sister-in-law laughed and teased from the side, that's just how he is. When I married on Christmas, he said he wanted to give me all his savings too. The whole family burst into laughter. That very night, Archer left on a mission. I waited for him at home, too worried to sleep. The next day brought the devastating news that he had been captured and imprisoned. When Liliana found out, she came specifically to mock me. So what if you married Archer? So what if you know how to please people? What's the result? On your wedding night, your husband gets captured and imprisoned. I think you're just bad luck. When Archer dies, you'll be a widow. I slap Liliana across the face. If you dare talk nonsense again, I'll tear your mouth apart. Liliana covered her face in disbelief. You dare hit me? Aren't you afraid the Lakin family will come after you? I looked at her with contempt. The Lakin family won't go against the Martin family and the Newman family just for you. That's right, Liliana never did become Chandler's wife in the end. Chandler's parents despised what Liliana had done. When Chandler fought with his parents over Liliana, his father warned him, "You're not my only son. If you don't want this inheritance, plenty of others do." Chandler went to plead with his mother, but she had the same attitude. No matter which of your father's sons inherits the estate, my position won't be shaken. If you're not up to it, I don't mind adopting a son. That one sentence shattered Chandler's last hope. While Chandler wasn't a womanizer, he did have several concubines at home. After these concubines bore children, the lucky ones could keep them nearby, but most were raised by Chandler's mother. So although Chandler was the eldest son, he wasn't the only son. To compete for the inheritance, he could only improve his status through marriage. But because of the scandal at the previous engagement party, few women from good families were willing to marry him. Left with no choice, he married Lucia Ramirez from the Ramirez family. I heard Lucia was extremely jealous and quickly drove Liliana out of the house after the wedding. Liliana came crying to Chandler for support, but he didn't dare offend the Ramirez family and could only ask Liliana to move out. With her plans falling through and seeing that I was doing better than her, Liliana felt unbalanced and came to cause trouble for me. Chapter 6. I turned to Liliana. Instead of meddling here, you'd be better off figuring out how to go back and fight for your man. Just as Liliana was about to strike, Alex stopped her. In my house, you want to lay a hand on my family? Do you think I'm dead? Archer's mother, Emily Martin, helped me to a side to rest. The Archer item has been sent out as you requested. Don't worry, I will be back soon. Only then did I feel at ease. What I had sent out was the horse ranch I had Jesse purchase. At the time, I simply wanted to use that ranch to help Jesse make a fortune. After all, in my previous life, after I died, Chandler had made a killing off that very ranch. I never expected it would come in handy now. Alex ordered Liliana to be thrown out, and before she left, he specifically sent someone to notify Lucia. Go tell Lucia to keep her people in line. Liliana immediately turned pale with fear, forgetting all about saving face, and knelt on the ground desperately begging Alex to spare her life. Alex gave her a cold look and ordered her to be dragged away. Large crowds of citizens had already organized marches in the streets, shouting demands for the release of the patriots led by my husband. I led the crowd, holding banners and shouting loudly, "Fight for freedom! Defend our rights! Release Archer and the other patriots! Free the patriots! Restore liberty to America!" Each slogan struck straight to the heart. Students boycotted classes, workers went on strike, and countless compatriots united as one. The colonizers tried every means to suppress us, but when one fell, thousands more would rise. You can kill my body, but you cannot crush my desire for freedom. Truth cannot be killed. Through their efforts, Archer and the others were finally released. A government official pointed at me with a livid face. "Andrea, do you know what you're doing?" I met his gaze and answered firmly, "Fighting for freedom." The man seemed to lose all his strength in an instant, sighing. "This country is finished." I said, "No, it won't be. Our people will ultimately win independence and freedom for this land." Archer came out relatively unharmed, as the government still had to consider the Martin family's influence. The others, however, were covered in wounds. While caring for them, I continued to lead citizens in spreading the idea of independence. This independence movement continued with great momentum for nearly half a year. The ideals of freedom had taken deep root in people's hearts. Even children on the streets understood that we wanted independence. I think this was probably what we were striving for. Our efforts hadn't been in vain. The people of this land had finally awakened. That year, I became pregnant. Everyone urged me to rest peacefully at home, but I didn't. I used my status as a pregnant woman to pass many important messages for the patriot groups. I was arrested and imprisoned time and again, yet released time and again. During this period, countless people had already died from the colonizers' assassinations. The people's anger was completely ignited, and they did everything possible to overthrow colonial rule. The colonial authorities, mindful of public opinion, couldn't openly torture a pregnant woman like me, so they turned their dark hands toward my family. That year, Jesse, Phoebe, Alex, and Emily faced countless assassination attempts, each one aimed at taking their lives. Not only that, but the homes of almost everyone involved in the independence movement were attacked. Archer and I both understood this was the government's warning to us. They couldn't kill us, so they wanted to kill our families. So the resistance organization moved our relatives to safe locations for protection. There I gave birth to Archer's and my first child, Frederick Martin. Both Archer and I were very satisfied with this name. Frederick meant freedom. I held little Frederick and told him about the value of freedom, teaching him to love this land. Frederick later lived up to expectations, growing into an outstanding patriot. After the war broke out, Archer and I threw ourselves into it without hesitation. On the battlefield, I witnessed countless compatriots fall, never to rise again. I thought, whose sons are they? Whose husbands? Whose fathers? I stayed in the rear, caring for the wounded with the army. I once watched a 17-year-old life slip away before my eyes. Even as he died, he clutched a piece of candy tightly in his hand, gift from his sister. He had treasured that candy in his chest pocket, never bearing to eat it. I had seen him staring at the candy in a daze when he missed home. He once asked me, "Andrea, when will this war end?" "I still want to watch my sister grow up." I said, "It will. We'll definitely win, and then you can watch your sister grow up in a free country." I never had the courage to tell him that his sister had also died in another battle. She was only 15 when she died. I said, "Rest peacefully. When you wake up, our country will be a brand new nation, full of freedom." Chapter 7. I never imagined I'd encounter Lucia on the battlefield. When she was carried in, her right hand was mangled beyond recognition from an explosion, and she was completely unconscious. Several military doctors and I immediately rushed forward to bandage her wounds. Due to limited medical conditions, we could only perform an amputation surgery. I held her down on the bed while a nurse used a red-hot iron saw to cut off her entire right arm. Lucia regained consciousness several times from the excruciating pain only to pass out again, but throughout the entire procedure, she didn't let out a single groan. The first thing she said when she fully came to and saw me was, "I can't return to the battlefield anymore, can I?" Looking at her empty right sleeve, I tried to comfort her. "You can stay in the rear with us, treating the wounded." "You don't need to comfort me," she interrupted. "Compared to those soldiers who sacrificed their lives, I'm lucky, aren't I?" I lowered my head without saying a word. Yes, compared to them, she truly was fortunate. "Do you know which unit we're fighting against?" Lucia suddenly asked me. "The Colonial Army," I replied. "Do you know who's leading them?" she asked. I shook my head. I only worked in the rear medical unit and knew very little about the front lines. Lucia smiled and said a name that completely caught me off guard, Chandler. Hearing that name, I looked at Lucia in shock. I thought, how could it be him? Why would it be him? Lucia looked at me. "What's so shocking about that? He defected to the enemy the second day after the Colonial Army landed. It took me a while to recover. What about you?" Lucia said with a smile. "Ever since Alex kicked Liliana out, Chandler and I went our separate ways." "What about Liliana?" I wanted to ask how she was doing. In this war-torn era, how could she survive on her own? Lucia let out a cold laugh, interrupting me. "You still have the heart to worry about her? Right now your husband is fighting desperately on the front lines. Meanwhile, Liliana has become a colonial officer's mistress." Her words made me stop breathing for a moment, as if something had exploded in my brain. Liliana had become a colonial officer's mistress. How could she? Does she have some compelling reason? I asked. Lucia shook her head. "No, she did it willingly. Otherwise, how do you think Chandler managed to get himself a minor position over there?" At that moment, I almost lost the ability to speak. How could they defect to the enemy? How could they point their guns at their own countrymen without any burden? Lucia patted me with her remaining left hand. "Everyone has their own fate. Don't overthink it." I collected myself and nodded. This was a battlefield, and soldiers on the front lines were fighting desperately. I didn't have time to wallow in sorrow. Stretcher after stretcher was carried in, and we were so busy our feet barely touched the ground. Lucia also joined us, comforting soldiers and doing whatever she could to help. This battle lasted a month. We set out with 1,500 men and returned with fewer than 500. But at least we won. On the day the enemy retreated, Archer was carried in on a stretcher. He had been shot in the shoulder by Chandler. If he hadn't reacted quickly, that bullet would have hit his heart directly. He was wheeled in for bullet removal while I waited anxiously outside. Soon, I heard Archer's muffled groans from behind the curtain. The nurse said the bullet had been extracted and he just needed proper rest and recovery. I finally breathed a sigh of relief. On the day we returned home, Archer pulled me up to ride behind him on horseback. He said, "The war is about to end. Our general will surely lead us to victory in this war." Held in his embrace, I nodded. Yes, we would ultimately triumph. Standing at our front door, our parents were waiting anxiously with Frederick. Seeing us return safely, their eyes immediately welled up with tears. Alex patted Archer's shoulder. "Archer, you finally decided to come home." Emily and Phoebe took my hands, their faces streaked with tears. "Andrea, you've gotten so thin." Frederick tugged at Archer, babbling and wanting to be held. How wonderful, our family was finally reunited. 8 months later, the war came to its final victory. During this period, Archer and I had another son and daughter. Our second son was named Pax Martin, and our little daughter. Plus, since the fighting wasn't intense at the time, I let Hope continue staying at the military camp. Hope spent all her time around the military camp, and the first word she learned to say was, freedom. Chapter 8. The Christmas when Hope turned 10, the War of Independence finally ended in victory. I held my 2 sons' hands while Archer carried our daughter, and we witnessed the birth of our new nation in the capital. In front of the congressional building stood the warriors who had fought alongside us. Some had lost their legs, others their arms, and some bore incomplete bodies. They supported each other, standing in the square to share this hard-won joy. Below, thousands of citizens were celebrating the arrival of freedom and independence. Among them were those who had lost sons, husbands, and fathers. Some families had sacrificed everything on the battlefield. Now that the war had finally ended in victory, some comrades couldn't even bring back complete remains. They remained forever on the battlefield, in the most brilliant bloom of their lives. Archer had injured his hands and feet early in the war, and they ached terribly whenever it rained. Every rainy day, our 3 children would dutifully help massage his legs and rub his arms. After the war's victory, we invited Lucia to move in with us. She stared at us and said, "You two are doing just fine. What's the point of me moving in?" "I'm not going." But she couldn't resist Hope clinging to her arm and acting cute. The house that Alex and Emily had prepared for us when we married was destroyed in the war. So Archer, along with our 2 sons and our fathers, worked together to rebuild our home, keeping themselves busy with great enthusiasm. Alex was straightforward with a rough personality. He couldn't build houses, only handle physical labor. While carrying lumber, he laughed heartily. "Well, I've been idle most of my life, so now I can finally get some exercise." Emily ran out of the makeshift kitchen with a large iron ladle, chasing after Alex and shouting, "Quit talking and get to work. After you finish this, you still need to chop firewood." Standing at our front door watching them bicker and play around, my eyes involuntarily welled up with tears. How wonderful this was. When I turned around, Lucia scolded me. "What are you crying for?" I smiled back. "What? Am I not allowed to cry now?" Lucia rolled her eyes at me. "I have serious business. Chandler and Liliana have been arrested. Do you want to go see them? After all, you're Liliana's only remaining family." I sighed and said, "We were sisters once. I should at least see her off." Lucia looked at me and said, "That sister of yours is no simple matter. I'll come with you to take a look." I teased her. "Are you worried about me now?" Lucia replied, "I can't be bothered to argue with you." I applied to the government to visit Liliana and Chandler. The application was quickly approved, and I brought Lucia to the prison to see them. As soon as Liliana saw me, she was huddled and disheveled in a corner of the cell, covered in filth. When she saw me approaching, she immediately sat up straight. "What are you here for? To laugh at me?" She brushed the dirt off herself and glanced at Lucia. "Oh wow, you came too? Where's your right hand?" Lucia gave her a cold look. "Enough. I don't even bother with your petty tricks. Want to make me angry? You're not worthy." Then she looked Liliana up and down. "Instead of worrying about my right hand here, you'd better worry about yourself first." Liliana sneered disdainfully. "Worry about myself? What's there to worry about? While you've been struggling on the edge of life and death these 8 years, I've been enjoying life. I have no regrets. I was their commanding officer's precious darling. How could people like you compare to me?" Looking at this deranged woman before me, I sighed. But Lucia didn't have my patience. She snorted coldly, interrupting Liliana's delusions. If you were really that favored, why didn't they take you with them when they evacuated? If I truly loved someone, how could I bear to leave her behind to suffer? Stop fooling yourself. You were nothing but their plaything. A mistress to be used at will, a woman who willingly degraded herself. What's there to be proud of? You're full of crap. I was their commander's precious darling. I was his beloved. Liliana clutched the prison bars, defending herself with a hoarse, desperate voice. Unfortunately, Lucia had already pulled me away and we'd turned to leave. When I saw Chandler, I didn't know what to say for a moment. After all, in my previous life, I had truly loved him. In this life, my hatred for him was almost overflowing. Seeing me arrive, he remained calm, but his first words were, "If I hadn't slept with Liliana that day, would you have loved me?" I couldn't help but laugh. After all these years, is romance all left in that brain of yours? Chandler seemed ashamed, yet also unwilling to speak in front of Lucia, so he just kept his head down in silence. Lucia looked at him and sighed. We were husband and wife once. Though we weren't meant to be, I still feel sorry for you. If you hadn't betrayed your country back then, perhaps you wouldn't have ended up like this today. Everything that's happened to you, you brought it on yourself. I looked at him with a sarcastic tone. You fell in love with Liliana because of a diary, but do you know what? That diary, she copied it from me. So the person you saw through that diary was me, yet you personally pushed me toward someone else. How does that feel? Does it hurt? A traitor like you deserves nothing but a miserable death, dying with endless regret and pain. Chandler looked at me and shouted excitedly, Impossible. You're lying to me. You're lying. Lucia smiled at him. Whether I'm lying or not, you could just ask Liliana, couldn't you? Oh wait, I forgot you probably won't get to see her again. Sorry about that. Looks like you'll just have to die with that question unanswered. After saying this, she even raised an eyebrow at Chandler with disdain. I looked at Lucia with her sharp tongue and smiled as I pulled her out of the cell. Lucia kept turning back to mock Chandler while complaining that I was dragging her away. Hey, what's the rush? Let me say a few more things. I laughed and cut her off. All right, visiting hours are over. Chapter 9. Lucia pulled her hand away from mine in annoyance, muttering, All this grabbing and pulling, what kind of behavior is that? I poked her. What's it to you? Then she leaned closer, asking curiously, But is that diary really yours? Can I take a look? I pushed her away. All this grabbing and pulling, what kind of behavior is that? Lucia's eyes widened. Hey, Andrea, don't you dare talk nonsense. When did I ever grab or pull you? I ignored her and kept walking. Then explain to me why everyone says you're jealous every Christmas. She hurried to catch up. Oh, that's just my dad making stuff up because he was worried I'd get taken advantage of. Plus I have a bit of a temper, so that's how the rumors started. Come on, let me see your diary. We've been through life and death together, just let me have a look. I couldn't resist her persistence and finally handed over the diary. From then on, whenever she had free time, she'd hold the diary and cuddle Hope, having Hope read it aloud to her. Day after day they read like this, through Hope's elementary and middle school years, until Hope could recite the entire diary from memory. One day, Hope held the worn, well-thumbed diary and asked Lucia, Lucia, you've been reading this diary for so many years, don't you get tired of it? Lucia put on her reading glasses and carefully turned a page. No, Archer interjected with a hint of jealousy, that's my wife's diary. Lucia shot him a look. I can't be bothered with you. A few years later, Frederick and Pax both went off to school. One joined the military, the other went into research. I asked Hope, what do you want to do? Without hesitation, Hope replied, be a doctor. Several more years passed. Frederick and Pax both got married, and we began taking care of our grandson Miles Martin. Lucia held Miles, clearly adoring him. Miles, you must read lots of books when you grow up, and be as learned as your grandmother. That's when I finally understood Lucia didn't really love that diary. She just wanted to see what it would feel like if she could have gone to school and learned to read too. Though Archer and Lucia usually didn't get along, this time he proudly chimed in, that's right, my wife is the most learned person there is. I laughed and interrupted them. All right, the children of the future will all be smarter than us. Later on, Lucia lost interest in bickering with Archer. Archer started using a cane, and I put on reading glasses. We stood at the elementary school entrance, watching lively, adorable little lives run out through the school gates. Miles threw his arms around my legs. Grandma, the teacher told us about the Revolutionary War today. I smiled and took his backpack. Really? What did she say? He said, she talked about how Grandpa led troops into battle. It was so cool, I want to lead troops into battle too. Archer gave Miles a gentle tap on the back of his head. Silly boy, this country we have now, we fought tooth and nail for it. With such a free and prosperous nation, you still want to go to war? Miles held his head and ran to Lucia for comfort. She hugged him while complaining to me about Archer. And that's a wrap on today's reading here at Booked for Drama. If you felt anything, rage, swoon, secondhand heartbreak, let me know in the comments. Don't forget to like, subscribe, and share with your fellow drama lovers. If you have any requests, drop them in the comments. Until next time, keep reading, and keep the drama on the page.